I'm bored with the pathetic story. It bores me. Get on the ladder.
You play your cards right until you got the surgery. And now you're playing this kind of game and you think that's okay? How in the world
don't see
somebody...
how I'm playing any game.
No, Greg. Greg. No. You gonna throw up? No, throw up in front of me. Let me see it. If you do not throw up right now, we're gonna have problems.
I learned a hard lesson, you know? You just cannot pull that kind of crap. There's no question in my mind that Zero reflects her actions this week.
I'm not gonna be able to get there. When I seen the stairs, I immediately knew I wasn't going to be able to go up them.
So I watch a lot of reality TV. I'm like really interested in reality TV. Something I've always felt like was a bit odd was how sort of normalized it is for reality shows to be focused on fat people. I'm talking about shows that like specifically like the whole purpose of the show is that the people on the show, they are like big people, and that's like the point of the show. If you actually pay attention and use even like a smidge of critical thinking, you'd be able to see right away that like the entire purpose of the show and the reason why so many people watch it and why it's so popular is because they get some sense of satisfaction or some kind of emotional response while they're watching it. It allows the viewers the space to judge fat people. And even if they're not outwardly saying those things themselves, they're still consuming the content. And as we know, the things that we consume, especially if we consume these things without much thought beyond the surface level, these things inform our biases. And obviously our biases are what influence how we perceive and how we treat other people, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. We've made a lot of progress, I think, as a society, as far as our general understanding of fat phobia, but there's definitely levels to it. So I would say that most people who see advertisements and popular media fall into the category of understands it's wrong to be outwardly judgmental and mean to fat people and that everyone should love their body, right? And we see this all the time in ads and marketing campaigns. I feel like at this point, love your body, everyone deserves to, self-love, etc. That's just sort of like the thing to do and like the way to be. I think it's pretty rare to see people still like very outwardly criticize others for their bodies, at least without getting some type of backlash. The next sort of category of people who likely spend a bit more time online, probably in more left-leaning spaces, could be grouped into doesn't necessarily believe in pushing self-love as much as fat acceptance, and believes people of all body sizes should be able to just live and exist freely. And I think lastly, the smallest group of people who would be considered pretty niche and are probably like very online are those who know that fat phobia doesn't literally mean like hates fat people, but that it's a systemic issue, very much like racism, that affects everyone, and especially fat people in all facets of life, and that it can't be solved by pushing self-love. A shout out to Mustard is Decent on Reddit for compiling this master list of reality shows about overweight people. This list is actually so much longer than I even realized. There's My 600-Pound Life and its spin-offs, Too Large, which is apparently similar, Hot and Heavy, 1,000-Pound Best Friends, 1,000-Pound Sisters, etc., etc. There's so many of these shows, and it's weird. It's weird. It's getting very weird. So why are there so many shows like this? Why do so many people still watch this kind of content even today? You would think by now we would be beyond consuming this type of exploitative media, but we're not, obviously. And I want to pick it apart. How do these things make us feel when we watch them? And why I think we still watch them and where this desire comes from. And ultimately, the reason is not relatability. inspiration, or motivation, as much as the show's producers and its viewers might try to convince themselves that it is. It's fairly easy to find where other people are asking the same question on the internet. I'm definitely not the first person to wonder about this, but I wasn't surprised, obviously, to see some very sugar-coated responses and flat-out lies from the show's higher-ups. You can't ignore how successful The Biggest Loser has been, says TLC Development VP Rita Mullen in 2009. But more than that, society is looking at the issue in a different way. Now, the kind of programming we're doing on cable reflects that we're putting a human face to what had been before a punchline. When you watch a show like 650-Pound Virgin or Ruby, suddenly you realize, I can identify with this person. I call bullshit. It's obviously a relatable matter and already a staple of daytime, says Mark Coops, executive producer on Loser. Traditional print magazines have done well with stories about self-transformation. You look at any kind of recession, and self-help books tend to do better as the economy worsens, which I do think makes sense. As the economy goes down, our desire to regain some sense of control in our lives increases, manifesting as desiring self-help and transformation content. I actually think that tracks. Author of the article says, with so many TV viewers struggling with their weight, showcasing more realistically sized people on reality TV would seem to be a no-brainer. Biggest Loser proved, along with shows like Little People, Big World, that there doesn't have to be that axiom that people need to be ultra thin or ultra good looking on TV, says Fox alternative topper Mike Darnell. Now, that I think is an absolutely outrageous thing to say about The Biggest Loser, because the entire point of the show is to get skinny. The whole premise is that you come onto the show and your body is not good enough, and we are going to force you to make your body better. We came to the conclusion that women who watch shows like The Bachelor don't look anything like the women in those shows. You go to sites like eHarmony or Match.com, you're not going to see anyone who looks like the women from The Bachelor. An advertised reality contestant is usually a size 2, while the average woman is a size 14. This is much more reflective of real life. It reflects the dating pool better. So they're really trying to make us think that these shows were created so that us regulars would have something relatable to watch. The Biggest Loser and My 600-Pound Life are not about people who are size 14. A 14 is not fat by any means. If you're considering a size 14 to be plus size, I feel like you are still stuck in the early 2000s. I think it's nuts to say that average people who are watching these shows are identifying with the people who are actually the subject of the show. That's absolutely not the purpose of these shows at all. Network execs and producers say they're not looking to exploit overweight people, arguing that most of their shows are inspirational in nature, such as plus-size folks looking to lose weight or go on a date. So here is where we're getting into some actual truth. I actually do believe that their intention here is to create some sort of inspirational content, but why is this sort of thing considered inspirational? The only way that you could view these shows as a source of inspiration is if you view the people as being different enough that them doing normal things like exercising, eating, going on dates, trying on wedding dresses, is inspirational. If watching somebody do some normal everyday things is inspirational to you, maybe take a minute to consider why. Like, why is a fat person eating or trying to live their life? Why is that inspirational to you? So this isn't to say that we shouldn't show fat people doing things on TV, or that watching fat people do anything on a show or on a reality show is automatically considered inspiration porn. That's not my point at all. What I'm trying to say is that what really matters is the intention of the creators and the producers and the networks. What kind of light are we actually painting all of the participants of these shows in? And is it supposed to be inspiration porn? The focus of a lot of these shows is on some kind of big transformation, right? Like My 600-Pound Life, the purpose of that show is that they're trying to change their habits so they can qualify for this weight loss surgery. Obviously, the whole purpose of The Biggest Loser is for them to basically be beaten to a pulp to lose a bunch of weight in order to have this big reveal at the very end. You can see like, oh my gosh, now they look so good, they look so amazing. And of course there's the before and afters. Before is like them in their underwear on this scale, and it's all like gray filtered and it's so humiliating. And then their after is like them in person, all dressed up, makeup on, the lighting looks great, and obviously they're like thin, and everyone's cheering and there's confetti and they're being praised and they're being told that they've accomplished this amazing thing by losing all this weight. and now they're winners. What we're getting into here is the idea that there's some level of morality around our food and eating and exercise behaviors, and also on our bodies, around our appearances, and the way that other people perceive us. From a research article called The Moralization of Obesity by Megan Ringel, weight stigma is prevalent in Western society and has numerous negative effects on people with obesity. There remains a strong and currently unmet need to understand why anti-fat attitudes are tenacious and what intervention strategies might best produce long-lasting attitude change. Weight stigma is a troubling and pervasive phenomenon in the US. Obese individuals are more likely to experience a myriad of problems stemming from weight stigma, also referred to in the literature as obesity stigma, weight bias, and anti-fat attitude or prejudice, including stress and disordered eating, interpersonal discrimination, and discrimination in the domains of employment and healthcare. So especially if you're in your 20s, you probably remember at some point in the 2000s and 2010s where food was moralized to you. Things like viewing certain foods as an indulgence, viewing foods as being good or good for you or bad for you. Junk food, right? These are all still pretty common things that people say when you're cheating on your diet or you're having a cheat day, even if it's said in a playful way. All of those things are really just applying some type of morality to food. Because in reality, food is food. And I've always really been bothered by the prevalence of this sort of moralization of food because it doesn't help us. It really only harms us. And essentially what you're doing when you're assigning some sort of moral value to food is you're unintentionally applying that moral value to yourself. So when you eat something bad, then you feel bad and you feel like you're a bad person and like you've made a bad decision. It's true, obviously, that the things that we eat affect how we feel physically. But what we eat doesn't have to make us feel like a good or bad person because it works in both ways, right? You can assign negative moral value to foods, but you can also assign positive moral value to certain foods. And I actually think that both of those ways of thinking are not healthy for us. If you're constantly obsessing over eating the very best thing at all times, it's still going to wreak havoc on your mental health. And it's still going to lead you down a rabbit hole of feeling like you can't eat certain things, or you're a bad person if you don't only eat good things. And none of that is really helpful for us at the end of the day. And it all contributes to anti-fat bias. So when we're trying to figure out what is the purpose of these shows, there's likely multiple purposes. And aside from considering morality, I do believe that probably the most obvious connection that we can make historically to shows like this is to freak shows. A freak show, also known as a creep show, is an exhibition of biological rarities, referred to in popular culture as freaks of nature. Typical features would be physically unusual humans, such as those uncommonly large or small, those with intersex variations, those with extraordinary diseases and conditions, and others with performances expected to be shocking to viewers. They also had heavily tattooed or pierced people and physical performers like fire eaters and sword swallowers, which those last two make sense. During the late 19th and early 20th century, freak shows were at their peak in terms of popularity. And this is obviously a for-profit industry, and of course, like everything under capitalism, there were people being exploited. There were the showmen, the people with, the differences, the rarities, whatever, and then there were the show runners. Most notable of these was P.T. Barnum. P.T. Barnum was considered the father of modern-day advertising and one of the most famous showmen and managers of the freak show industry in the United States. He was a major figure in popularizing the entertainment. I watched the trailer for The Greatest Showman and I could not believe the tone and the way that they were portraying this man. P.T. Barnum abused and exploited people. And they're making it seem like he's just some sort of really ambitious entrepreneur who believes that all people, no matter what they look like, should have the ability to be on stage and perform and entertain people, as if he's uplifting this community of misfits. And that could not be farther from the truth. Did you know that P.T. Barnum, he started out his career when he was 25 years old. He started out his career by essentially buying purchased a woman, right? Slavery, who was previously owned by a different white man who would take her around, and this is a very old Black woman, and essentially would like show her off and parade her around as this spectacle because he claimed that she was like 100 something years old and that she was the nurse for George Washington. That was basically the whole shtick. That's how he started his career. And the fact that they like didn't even acknowledge that in the production, and they just want you to believe that this man is just like this picture perfect example of like American entrepreneurial spirit. Barnum was fully aware of the improper ethics behind his business, and he said, "I don't believe in duping the public, but I believe in first attracting and then pleasing them." During the 1840s, Barnum began his museum, which had a constantly rotating act schedule, which included the Fat Lady, in capital letters, the Fat Lady. Literally, the entire purpose of her was that she was fat and a lady. The museum drew in about 400,000 visitors a year. And so fast forward to now, what we have with these reality shows is just a modern version of the freak show. And after doing a bit more research on P.T. Barnum and essentially the way that he seemed to feel about his productions and the morality and the ethics around it, I feel like there's a connection between that and the way that reality show producers and executives try to justify the ways that they position and frame the characters on their shows. Where essentially, like, the executives are talking about how their reasoning for making these shows and centering this content around fat people is essentially for the viewer, for the benefit of the viewer, and because the viewer is able to feel the sense of relatability. And they're sort of emphasizing like what the viewer gains from being able to see these people's lived experience on the show, right? And what's interesting is that P.T. Barnum actually says similar things. This is from a Smithsonian Magazine article actually about The Greatest Showman titled, "P.T. Barnum Isn't the Hero the Greatest Showman Wants You to Think." Barnum's career trafficked in curiosities, which he served up to a public hungry for such entertainment, regardless of how factual or ethical such displays were. Each were full of bigger-than-life ideas marketed to an audience interested in mass and often crass entertainment. As it was generally understood, Barnum wrote in the book, the term humbug consists in putting on glittering appearances, outside show, novel expedients, by which to suddenly arrest public attention and attract the public eye and ear. And Barnum wanted to make it clear that such a practice was justified. There are various trades and occupations which need only notoriety to ensure success, he claimed, concluding no harm, no foul, so long as at the end of the day, customers felt like they got their money's worth. And I just think that's really interesting, that the sort of parallel between these two is that their point is there's nothing wrong with the production or the show, there's nothing wrong with this form of entertainment, and there's nothing wrong with putting the subjects of this entertainment in the positions, in the situations, and then framing them in this light. There's nothing wrong with any of this. This is all morally totally solid, as long as the viewers feel like what they're getting out of it is worth it. And obviously, they're centering the viewer and the spectator of the spectacle over the actual experience and the treatment of the people who are being used as spectacle. And so, if you're someone who watches these kinds of shows, these fat-focused reality shows, as I call them, I really hope that you take all the information I've presented in this video and really think deeply about it. It's totally possible that you watch these shows and didn't feel like you were exploiting these people, right? I mean, you're not doing the exploiting by watching them. But I do think that we should all spend a little bit more time thinking critically about the things that we consume, all types of media, but honestly, especially reality content, because reality TV is extremely manipulative. The people who create and produce these shows want you to feel things. They want you to feel very specific things and have pretty specific emotional responses that make you keep wanting more and keep wanting to watch the show. It's like attention mining, if you've heard of that before. It's all the same sort of thing. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you spending your time with me today. I hope you found what I had to say interesting, and I hope that you have a wonderful day. Bye!